Welcome back to the shop. We're back on the Buggy today, and I have dismantled the entire drivetrain. Let's find out why. All right, so as you can see, I've got body panels off and all kinds of craziness going on up here. And then down here, more of the same story. So you can see the transfer case is completely separated. It's sitting on a board right there. I've got the drive shafts totally out. The front and the back, obviously, since the transfer case is completely disconnected. So the reason for this, I alluded to in one of my prior videos. The transmission is leaking a little bit, and the leak started to get worse than I wanted to tolerate. Now I know why it's leaking. That's because I forgot to put silicone on it. I mentioned in the prior video, but when I was initially assembling the drivetrain, this is an adapter plate that goes on the back of the transmission and adapts the transmission to the transfer case. And when I put it all together, it was just for mock-up, so I purposely didn't put silicone on there, put it all together, to mock the whole drivetrain up. And then months of building this rig passed by. And then when I dismantled everything, I put silicone on the transfer case side, but it just slipped my mind that I hadn't put, this is bolted to the transmission, and I didn't have a reason to take it off. And I forgot that, months ago, I hadn't put silicone on the transmission side. I got it all together and saw that it was leaking, knew why it was leaking, and decided to just kind of band-aid it for now so I could because I wanted to drive the thing, right? I wanted to get it all together, do some testing, make sure everything worked, But now it's gotten to the point where, I need to fix it correctly. So it's a humongous amount of work to blow this whole drivetrain apart. And I haven't been filming much. I've been just slugging away at it the last 2 days, working on the ground. It is so tiring working on the ground. Man, it's going to be nice if we ever get a lift in the shop, but it's very tiring working on the ground, especially when you're kind of on the ground at the wrong level, and you're constantly reaching up and having to pull your body up into contorted positions up in there. So it's quite an amount of work, and obviously this mistake, mistakes like this happen on really big projects like this, and I'm sure paying for it. Not in dollars, obviously, but in blood, sweat, and tears. So I'll get to working on this. The first step today is just get all this cleaned off and brake cleaned, and then get the transfer case and transmission side all cleaned off with brake cleaner and get this all ready to reapply some silicone. All right, it's been a week. We're back in the shop. Last week, got the transmission to transfer case adapter plate siliconed this time and installed, and the transfer case on the adapter plate. I was completely blasted by the end of the day, and really the end of that whole weekend. It's quite the job muscling that thing around in there, because obviously transfer case is full of oil and it's heavy anyway, but it's just tight quarters. You're working, with your hands way out like this because of how much ground clearance this thing has. So I didn't even film like an outro or whatever from last week. So got that squared away though. And then just yesterday, I put 6 quarts of transmission fluid in the transmission just to let it sit overnight and see if it's gonna leak. And it's gonna need, obviously, it's probably going to need a little bit more transmission fluid than that, but obviously I need to run it to check the oil while it's running. But I wanted to have just enough in there to, it should be enough to see if it's prove that it's leaking or not. So let's take a look. No leaks. Fantastic. You have no idea how happy this makes me. That's awesome. All right, so order for the day. I figure we'll get the drive shafts back in. And then maybe we'll start it up later and check the oil, get the oil level squared away. Get this vent back routed properly again. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to button up all these electronics just yet because I figure now's a good time to mess with this backup camera problem. So if you've been following my other videos, this backup camera kind of shuts off, turns on, shuts off kind of periodically when the engine's running. I wiggled wires like crazy, and I don't think it's a loose wire problem because it doesn't do it at all when nothing's running. But looking at my data logs on even just from HP Tuners, it looks like there are some transients that, the alternator's keeping up just fine now with this bigger, beefier alternator, but there's still some transients where it dips down in the 9-volt range for 200 milliseconds at a time, which is, very small, and for most devices can usually handle that. But maybe this backup camera can't. So the next thing I'm going to try, I could do a little bit more like investigation to see if it's actually to see if it's actually, voltage transients or electromagnetic interference. It could be interference. If it's interference, then what I'm about to tell you is not going to fix the problem. But what I thought of, assuming it's the voltage transient problem that I don't feel like diagnosing, I'm just going to try this and see if that fixes the problem, is I ordered a boost buck converter, which is a form of voltage regulator. It's basically going to smooth out those transients. So once I'll leave this, that's obviously going to take like a week to get here. I'll leave all this blown apart up here, and then when that comes in, hook that up. I'll hook it up obviously I have to figure out where to mount the little thing, but ahead of that I'll just hook it up like out here, kind of crude, rudimentarily, run the engine, see if that fixes the problem. Run the rear steer. The rear steer is really the load that drops the voltage the hardest, obviously. That rear steer pump, for short periods of time draws, about the same kind of draw that a starter motor would. It's like 170 amps. So that's where the voltage drop is. So we'll see what that does. But that'll come later. Probably not in this video. Maybe in this video, I don't know. So there it is, all buttoned back up again. Got the shifter linkage reinstalled, got the vent line for the transmission ran, got the drive shafts installed, and yeah, shifter linkage, transfer case linkage, and the transmission shifter linkage all hooked back up. So obviously this isn't, you know, glamorous project to work on to have to fix your mistakes, but I figured it'd probably be valuable to show that when you're working on these big projects, you know, it's inevitable that you're just gonna make some mistakes here and there, and you know, it's all part of the journey. You just gotta keep charging on, keep working on it, and you know, try not to get discouraged when you have setbacks and, you know, mistakes. You know, it's all just part of it. So keep working on your projects, and I don't know, whatever else I wanted to say. So yeah, everything's buttoned back up except for the panels and whatnot. I'm gonna leave the panels all apart for now. I was working on the wiring for the rear steer camera to fix that problem with the rear steer camera. I'm waiting on that boost converter to come in, and maybe I'll show installing that and probably in the next video. So thanks for watching.